Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas. Crowds screamed and lay down on the grass. As the motorcade went by, police broke away and began chasing an unknown gunman across some railroad tracks. It was not known if the shots were aimed at the president. Repeat, it is not known if the shots were aimed at the president.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital. From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital.
Hey, it's 10 o'clock, right? Are you able to hear all right? I had hoped to be able to see you, but I can't. They've put light on me here, so I can see that. It's too bad that you have to look at me. By the way, Barry Stockwell's running the sound and whatnot, the equipment up there, and he's given me a not too subtle reminder. There's a play that's going on here in Next Stage yesterday and over the next few days, and the props he left out. A grim reminder if I don't do a good job. I got a gravestone and a coffin right over here, so I'm a little nervous about that. I know there are a few of you who were over in Townsend, Vermont the other day, and I told the people who were over there, and I will tell those of you who were over there and are here today, that this will not be the same presentation. It will start the same way, but it's going to change. And for those of you who are here, you won't miss anything. I've got enough stuff here to go for probably a month. So what pieces I pick out really are irrelevant to the presentation. The organizers of this event have told me that there's a mandatory break at 11 o'clock, which will be 1 hour. I'm going to say 5 minutes, and I'm going to start up again in 5 minutes. They have some refreshments. If you want them, they're downstairs. I'm assuming with the short period of time that if you get something, you can bring it back up here. I'm in real trouble if that's not the case. Are we all right with that, Barry? That's all good. Okay, no coughing on that. Okay, good. All right. I don't know because I can't see. N.O., are you here? I am. Well, I want you and my wife to come forward, please. So, pronto, front and center, Lyle and Nancy. Lyle Holliday and Nancy Olson, English teacher extraordinaire. And these two, get over here. These two know me like the back of my, actually like the front of my hand, because they're the ones that have gone over what's in this book with a fine-tooth comb. I mean a fine-tooth comb. I don't even call my wife Lyle, or what I've called her for years, ML, the mother lode. Lode spelled L-O-D-E now. Don't get me in trouble here. I call her now the Hawk because she looks at what I've written down and she finds something out of place all the time. But I want you, and N.O. has been the major editor of this, and You're the nicest person in the world to put up with me and to take a look at this. She's just superb. She's a superb writer. I'm not. I was a teacher. She was a teacher and a writer. So there's one for you, N.O., and there's one for my wife, Lyle. Either of you want to say anything before you go back to your seats?
Thank you for doing this.
You'll have to say it in here. We're being live streamed. They can't hear you.
Thank you very much for writing this book.
It was fun. The subject isn't fun. No, oh, seen her shy. Okay. There she goes. So what are we doing here? We're here virtually, not quite, but virtually on the 60th anniversary of the most famous, heinous, widely scrutinized crime in American history, the assassination of President Kennedy. In Dallas, Texas, November 22nd, 1963, 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, in bright sunshine with a temperature at 66 degrees in Dallas, Texas. President Kennedy was cut down, and you don't and I don't know to this day who did that. Think that over. This is the president, not your neighbor, perish the thought, not somebody you read about in the Brattleboro Reformer or in any other newspaper, or saw something on CBS News. The president of the United States in broad daylight on the streets of a major American city, eliminated, and we don't know. And there are reasons for that. So let me get going here. I've got some things for you to look at other than me. I'm looking for somebody who's saying, oh, thank goodness. I don't see any, though. So, all right. Anyway, let me, yes, you read. As a comment from the peanut gallery from an old friend. No, a friend from a long time ago and today saying I look beautiful. So his eyesight has deteriorated since I last worked with him. They wanted me to sit in this chair, but I don't usually sit in a chair. I like to walk around. So I'm going to be standing up predominantly. I'm going to sit down occasionally. But I'm restricted as to where I can go because they need light for the live stream, and I will do my best to stay here. So what was President Kennedy doing in Dallas, Texas in 1963? This is President Kennedy. This is the last speech he would ever give alive. He's giving the speech. In Fort Worth, Texas, on the morning of the 22nd. He'd already been to Houston. He'd already been to San Antonio. He was now in Fort Worth, and after this, he would fly to Love Field, just a few-minute flight in Dallas, and then get in a motorcade, go through downtown Dallas at lunchtime, and it was planned specifically so that the business community would not be upset by having their employees and others crowd the streets instead of working. Speak at the Dallas Trade Mart, and then it was on to Austin, Texas, the capital, where he would deliver another speech at dinner. He never made the luncheon speech, obviously didn't make the dinner speech. But this is a telling photograph, and it helps to explain what Kennedy was doing there. Texas voted Democratic in 1960. As a matter of fact, it had for a long time. That obviously has changed to a certain degree, a good degree, because Lyndon Johnson, the president from Texas, a Southerner, had advocated for civil rights, and that alienated his Texas brethren. During Johnson's administration, two major pieces of legislation that had been proposed by President Kennedy were forged forward by Johnson. That's the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They started here. Off Kennedy's right shoulder, which is to the left of the screen here, down low, is Senator Yarborough of Texas. He represented the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. Just over Kennedy's other shoulder, more or less in the middle, but at the bottom, is Governor John Connally, also of Texas. He represented the right wing of the Democratic Party. Almost got ahead of myself. Because how conservative was Connally? By 1976, he had switched over to the Republican Party, and he tried to win the Republican nomination for President of the United States. He didn't get that nomination. Way over to the right, blocked by the microphone stand, is Lyndon Johnson, more or less at the center of gravity in the Democratic Party. There's President Kennedy giving his last speech. The motorcade route came under scrutiny. There's no question but that the security services proposed a route, and the people who were running the event didn't like it and did not abide by the recommendations of the security services. But it was put in the paper, and a lot of people have looked at this and said over the years that that's part of the conspiracy. You're telling everybody where he's going to be. Well, of course you are. It's a parade. If there was going to be a parade here down off the hill into downtown Putney, you'd want people to know where the president was going to go so they could put themselves in position to see him. So this was in the newspaper. There's the route, little map that went with it. And here's everybody in the car. ML, are you down there? Yes. Could you come take a look in my gray bag and see if that pointer is in here? I don't know where the bag is even now. But anyway, this is the presidential limousine, and the decision was made that day that ended up being fateful. The decision was for the top to be down in, and this is the name of the vehicle by the Secret Service, SS-100X. The morning was cloudy and drizzly, and so the thought was, let's keep the top up. But that's politically disadvantageous, and therefore, even though we might get a little wet, we'll get more voters if we keep that top down. In the very back, thank you, after these messages, we'll be right back. Hey, we're back already. Here's President Kennedy, if you haven't found him. There's Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy, his wife. Governor Connally. You can see that Kennedy was trying to court the right wing of the Democratic Party. Kennedy certainly wouldn't have been in it if he were in Texas. Governor Connally is going to be severely wounded this day. I'll probably say it a few times, but he's going to have broken ribs in the back right side. He's going to have a collapsed right lung. He's going to have a shattered right wrist, and there will be a somewhat superficial wound on his left thigh. That's a lot of damage. What's sad about that is that the Warren Commission, which was put together by President Johnson to investigate the assassination of President Kennedy, would say that Lee Harvey Oswald, using a World War II Italian-made rifle, a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, 6.5 millimeter rifle, would get off 3 shots in 5.6 seconds. Now, that's a bolt-action rifle. It's hunting season. If any of you out there are a hunter, even if you're not a hunter, you've got to acquire your sight, fire, eject the spent cartridge, acquire a second bullet, put it down in the chamber, acquire your sight again, and fire again, and then do that again. Nobody's ever been able to duplicate that. The Warren Commission would say that President Kennedy was hit in the back, and the bullet exited his throat, tumbled forward, and did all the damage I just told you to Governor Connally. Now, some of you probably have seen in the news that a Secret Service agent from this day says, I'm the one who found that bullet. Warren Commission Exhibit 399, the so-called magic bullet. One bullet did all of that damage. And it was found on the stretcher at Parkland Hospital where President Kennedy was taken. And Governor Connally as well. Kennedy went into trauma room 1. Connally went into trauma room 2. Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald, will be arrested, would be shot in the Dallas City jail while handcuffed to a Dallas City police detective named Jim Lavelle. He'll be taken to Parkland also. And they put him in trauma room 2. Out of respect for the president, they wouldn't let him in the same trauma room. This is Mrs. Connolly over here, she and Mrs. Kennedy. Nothing will happen to them. This is Roy Kellerman. He's the guy in charge here. And the driver is 54-year-old Bill Greer. 54, maybe not at the top of his game, and the way he reacted or didn't react has come under scrutiny in this case. You'll see 2 motorcycle policemen back here behind the car to the left. There are 2 more over here off the screen. There are more in front of the car. These 2 people, these 2 officers, would have their windscreens and their facial shields splattered with brain and blood matter. Now they're behind and to the left of President Kennedy. This is what Dealey Plaza, which is where President Kennedy was assassinated, looked like in 1963. It hasn't changed much because it's a protected historic site, the whole west end of Dallas that you're looking at. Love Field is off the screen. My pointer's up in the top left right now. It's beyond there. And the motorcade circumnavigated the city and beyond my pointer turned onto Harwood Street that joins with Main Street about 1 mile from here. This is Main Street, Dallas, Texas. It's 2-way traffic. The plaza's symmetrical. This is Elm Street. Traffic moves in one direction, one-way traffic this way. This is Commerce Street over here. It runs one way in the opposite direction. This is Houston Street. It did. There's some discussion that maybe they'll change it today, these days, but it's one-way traffic for part of it in this direction. So the last things that President Kennedy would see alive are what he could see as his car approached the plaza, made the 90-degree right-hand turn in the opposite direction of the normal flow of traffic, no traffic that day, of course, and then a 135-degree turn onto Elm Street. Now, Elm Street descends downward so that it can go under a railway overpass here called the Triple Overpass because there are 3 streets that go under it. You have to use Elm Street if you want to get on the freeway, which is here, and work your way, in Kennedy's case, out to the Trade Mart. People always ask me, why didn't you stay on Main Street? Could have avoided the 90-degree turn, the 135-degree turn. The answer is there's curbing down here between the streets. So you can imagine, obviously it's to keep traffic in its normal pattern. You imagine what happened down there if there was no curbing and you have 2 one-way streets and a 2-way street in the middle. So that's why. There's nothing sinister about that. In the plaza that day are a number of eyewitnesses, and I've interviewed a bunch of them. You're going to get to hear from a few if I'll stop talking. You had it with me? You're all right? Okay. You wouldn't tell me the truth anyway. Maybe you would. Anyhow, on this corner was a 14-year-old girl with her 12-year-old sister, her mother and her father. Her name is Linda Willis. This was special to the Willis girls because they were the kind of family their parents never let them miss school. I mean, never. Cold, flu, fever, you're going to school. But this day, Phil Willis, a retired military man, took his kids out of school to see the President of the United States. So they knew it was special. They're going to watch President Kennedy's car make this last turn and then start to work its way away from them. As it does, the younger of the Willis girls, the 12-year-old, is going to run along. You'll see her in a minute running when I show you the film. And she's trying to get President Kennedy's attention, waving at him, Mr. President, come look at me, look at me. He never did, and she gave up. You'll see her give up if that's what you want to watch when I show you the film. There's lots to watch. Linda was here, and I'll let Linda tell you the important things of what she saw in just a moment. But I want to leave you with one thing that she said. The day I interviewed Linda, we were standing in the foyer of this building. That's the Texas School Book Depository. That's the building that everybody knows. That's the building the Warren Commission said Lee Harvey Oswald was in the southeast corner, 6th floor window right here, when he shot at the president. Again, for you hunters, not when the president was coming right at him, slowing down to a crawl to make that 135-degree turn in that car, which is heavy like a tank. What a shot for a hunter. Instead, he waited until the car was on its way out of town, if you will, and then got off those 3 shots. Again, that's the Warren Commission. And Oswald's up here. So we're standing here with Linda Willis, and it's raining heavily, and there's traffic because it's early evening. So she was hard to hear a little bit. And a week ago this morning, I said, this new AI that's out there, maybe it works. So I applied some artificial intelligence to some of these audio files, and wait till you hear the difference. It cleaned up all that rain. It's gone. And all you can hear is Linda. But what did she say that got my attention? I had just finished filming with her permission, and we were walking her back to the parking lot, and just before we left here, I said, Ms. Willis, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of controversy over how many shots were fired in Dealey Plaza that day. What did you hear? You got your seatbelts on? Linda Willis, quote, I'll never forget it. All I can say is, it was loud, and there was lots of it. 14-year-old girl. Other people swear there were 3 shots. Others more, 4, 5, and 6. I may try an experiment on you a little later. So Linda Willis is here. There's a 17-year-old girl who's by age supposed to be in high school. She's not in high school. Her name's Beverly Oliver. She got really mad at me when I shared with her the chapter I'd written about her that's in that book, because I called her a high school dropout. She was furious. That's not right, Bill. I was homeschooled. Okay, I took it out of the book. It's not in there anymore. But she was a dancer at the Colony Club on Commerce Street, this one down here. If you continue up to the 1900 block, you get to Jack Ruby's club, the Carousel Club. It was a street with strip joints. Ruby owned one. He's going to be identified as the person who shot Lee Harvey Oswald in the city jail, handcuffed to Jim Lavelle. Next to it was the Colony Club. Beverly worked at the Colony Club. But on her breaks, she would walk over to Jack's Carousel Club. She loved Jack Ruby. She's told me a lot of things. What a wonderful guy Jack Ruby was. Big personality, give you the shirt off his back, blah, 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 When she arrived one time, Jack got up from his seat, which is what gentlemen did. Bev introduced Beverly. This is my friend, Lee Oswald. Quote, he's with the CIA, end quote. There are others too. Jim Tague, not sure if we'll get to him, but he's a salesman, and he's parked his car because no traffic was moving through the plaza with the president coming through. He's going to be right here. And he complicated the Warren Commission terribly because he got hit by cement fragments that hit the curb at his feet. and the cement wafted up onto his face and drew blood. It wasn't real significant because he wasn't even aware of it until a Dallas policeman saw him and said, "Hey, you've got blood on your face." And Jim felt for that blood, and sure enough, it was there. That means the Warren Commission, with its 3 shots fired by Lee Harvey Oswald, all of them hitting something, a bullet in the president's back, 6 inches down from his collar, a bullet in his throat, and the bullet that killed him. 81 witnesses who saw the damage done by the bullet that killed President Kennedy. All the doctors agreed. We could have saved him from the throat wound. We could have saved him from the back wound. But we couldn't save him from this one. And 81 witnesses say that bullet hit Kennedy right here at the hairline from the front. Lee Oswald's behind at an elevated perch, if he's there at all, from the front, and blew out a hole in the occipital parietal area of President Kennedy's head, the size of a softball. Jim Tague means there was another shot. It didn't hit anything. It fell to a 32-year-old staffer in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania District Attorney's office. Wow, I put my computer to sleep. I'm sorry. Oh, jeez. Hang on. Anything. Damn. 4, so you're not the first. But anyway, to come up with some kind of a rationale, how did one bullet do all that damage to President Kennedy and Governor Conley? And he came up with what you and I now know as the magic bullet theory. I met Arlen Specter. He was working for the Warren Commission and questioning witnesses to the Kennedy assassination in 1963-64. But I met him on the 40th anniversary of the assassination of President Kennedy. I went to Duquesne University, and there were thousands of people in a large auditorium. And they were not believers in the Warren Commission report. And United States Senator from Pennsylvania at that time, not 32-year-old staffer anymore, Arlen Specter, walked up on the stage from the left-hand side, say over here. I was seated over here. I had my equipment going. I was recording everything he was saying. Fascinating. And I could tell he was just about finished. So I said, I'll pack up my stuff, walk down from my seat, and come over here. And just like here, 3 or 4 steps down, I stood right down there, and I said, he came in that way. Maybe he'll go out this way. Son of a gun, he did. Right where I am, down the stairs. And there I am, standing face-to-face with Senator Arlen Specter. And I asked him about the magic bullet. He said this. Again, I had turned off my equipment. He said, this is another quotation, another one I'll never forget. That bullet had to go somewhere. And until somebody can give me a better explanation, I will stand by my story. Arlen Specter. All right, hang on here. Say hello to your neighbor while I turn my computer back on. I have to put this microphone down. Who knows what sounds it'll make if I drop it. Barry, I'm not going to, I don't know, maybe I am. All right, there's a coffin nearby, he just whispered to me. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Actually, why don't you come here, because they're going to ask me to repeat every question. Walk over here. Don't shout. I'll put the microphone down there. This is live streamed, and they'll never hear you.
Maybe I missed something, but you said that Arlen Specter's quote was he would never forget his story. He stood by his story.
He didn't say he wouldn't forget. I said I would not forget what he said to me, and what he said was he would stand by his story.
Had you related what his story was? Did I miss that, or had you already told? Are you going to get to that?
Well, I thought I had, and thank you. No, thank you for letting me know that I didn't do a good job with it. I'll do it right now. Arlen Specter is the fellow who invented the single bullet theory. Arlen Specter is the guy who said a bullet hit Kennedy in the back, exited his throat, tumbled forward, did the damage to the ribs, lung, wrist, left thigh of Governor Conley. Warren Commission Exhibit 399. Sorry I didn't do a good job with that. All right. This is a photograph I took, and it's on the cover of the book, adjusted by my producer over there, Reggie Martell. Thank you, G. People always wonder, how did you get that photograph? There's a restaurant there with a carousel. Goes very slowly. Just about the time, if you were having a leisurely meal, takes about, I think it was an hour and 3 minutes to go all the way around, but you can look down into the plaza. I took some photos. This is the Dallas police detective who was handcuffed to Lee Harvey Oswald. But this is about the parade route.
And the president chose the route that he was going to use. He chose the route that would come down through town, down Main Street. When he was informed by his Secret Service chief on Sunday morning in Fort Worth, or Friday morning in Fort Worth, he said, "Mr. President, we can't cover all those buildings along Main Street that where your route follows." And his remark to the agent was, if anybody wants to shoot the president, all they have to do is get on top of a building with a high-powered rifle and pick him off when you come along, and there's not anything you can do about it.
President Kennedy said that to Detective Lavelle and others. There's the parade route. Here's where some of the eyewitnesses are that I've pointed out. There's Linda Willis in her spot on the right-hand side of the screen. Beverly Oliver, who got mad at me about the chapter. There's Ed Hoffman. We'll try to get to Ed. I can't see it. He's way over there to the left anyway. These are all my photos. And here's Jim Tague pointing to his face when he was talking to students that I had in Dallas where the blood was drawn. And these are people we may or may not get to today. We'll see. The corner of Main and Harwood. This is Main Street. Way back in the mid-'70s when I took this photograph. It's changed a little bit, but not too much. Kennedy's car would be coming right at you. When it gets to the plaza, this is what he would see. This is what you see, even today. There's the triple overpass. Jim Tague would be down here. There's the so-called grassy knoll that many people feel a frontal shot came from. This is the turn onto Harwood. There are all kinds of people taking still photographs and film from here. There's the school book depository, just as President Kennedy would have seen it. You can tell, look at the cars when I took this photograph. I've been on this case a long time. There's the 6th floor window. The Warren Commission identifies. Abraham Zapruder worked for a garment manufacturing business, and their building was in Dealey Plaza. He'd recently purchased a Super 8 millimeter camera. It was the latest rage. Some of you are old like me and can remember the 16 millimeter. This one was 8. He had one. He thought, I'll bring it to the plaza. We'll go out on our lunch break. I'll film the motorcade. But it was drizzly and rainy. He left it home. His secretary, Marilyn Zitzman, said to him when the sun came out mid-morning, why don't you go home? I'll cover for you here at work. You go on home, get your camera. And so he did. And then he and she, around lunchtime, went into the plaza to find a suitable place. An edifice, not a building, but a pergola in the plaza. And he didn't want to get up there because he had vertigo. She said, look, let's get up there. I'll hold on to you. And so up they went, and there they were. This is the man on the screen that made the Zapruder film public. The United States government felt that you and I, the American public, wouldn't be able to take it to see this film. And so it was 12 years after the assassination when this man went on ABC's Geraldo Rivera show and showed everybody the Zapruder film. The very first time anybody outside of officialdom had seen it. ABC television. Bob Groden.
I want to introduce another guest. We have Robert Groden, who was celebrating his 18th birthday on the 22nd of November in 1963. He was profoundly touched by the president's death, and he desperately wanted to understand how it could have happened. For 2 years, he, like most Americans, believed in the official version, the Warren Commission version of what happened, but the day he first saw that 8mm Zapruder film, that amateur film that was made, that was the day he stopped believing. Robert, welcome, and I wish you could set up the Zapruder film a bit for us, and we'll get right into it.
Okay. Abraham Zapruder was a Dallas dress manufacturer, and it was pure accident that he brought the camera with him that day. He almost didn't. And he was looking for a good vantage point, and he picked a point on Elm Street in Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas. As the motorcade passed in front of him, he got what is frame for frame the most valuable historical document of all time.
It's become very chic among...
I can't see again. Excuse me here. Where did I put it? Just a minute. I have my own copy of the Zapruder film. I brought it with me. 8mm. I can't see because it's so darn dark up here. Where did I put it? Nah, I'll show it to you later, or if I forget, I won't. Obviously. Here we go.
Television producers to put a disclaimer at the head of any film. The film you're about to see might be shocking, it might be horrifying, you might not want your kids to watch it, and I think the unfortunate net effect of that is to make more people watch it. Well, I'm telling you right straight out that if you are at all sensitive, if you're at all queasy, then don't watch this film. Just put on the late night movie because this is very heavy. It's the film shot by the Dallas dress manufacturer Abraham Zapruder, and it's the execution of President Kennedy. And Bob and Dick, would you please narrate what we're seeing as we show this film?
This is commercial footage leading into Dealey Plaza. This is the car on Main Street.
So this film was taken by actual newsmen. This was spliced together with the Abraham Zapruder film?
Yes.
All right, so this is the beginning of the motorcade.
Okay, what you're seeing now is in slow motion so that you can grasp what is happening. This is...
That, by the way, is the turn. He's entering the plaza on Main Street, making the right-hand turn onto Houston. Are you okay with my using the names of these streets? Are you following, or is this confusing? No, that's good. You're okay. All right.
A film taken by Marie Muchmore that leads into the Zapruder film. It's for time continuity. The president is waving to the crowd here.
And Jacqueline Kennedy, of course, is sitting alongside him in the open car.
Right. This is from Orville Nix's film. This is originally 8mm footage. And they're heading now toward Elm Street. They're on Houston Street.
See the building in front of the motorcade and to the right? That's where Abraham Zapruder worked. The school book depository is just in front of the motorcade on the other side of the street. So at about 11 o'clock to where President Kennedy is.
Now, they're going to make a left-hand turn. It's on the corner where they're going to make the turn there that the book depository was. Now, this is the Zapruder film.
Okay, so the cars are coming along now into Dealey Plaza?
Yes, these are the lead motorcycles of the motorcade.
All right, now with the President and Mrs. Kennedy is also Governor Connolly.
Right. Now, before he goes behind the sign, the President is waving to the crowd. When he comes out from behind the...
Can you find President Kennedy? Let me help and make sure everybody can see him. Here's President Kennedy here. This is a sign. It's no longer there, but it's telling motorists, get over in the right-hand lane if you're going to use the interstate, the Stemmons Freeway, Interstate 35 in Texas. And that's what they needed to get to the trademark. So they're moving over to the right. And these are the very first frames after President Kennedy has emerged from behind the sign. So he's going to be shot with a throat wound, minimally, back wound too, behind the sign. He's already been shot. It's very grainy, this old film, but his hands are going up to his throat. He's in discomfort now. By the way, this film goes through the camera at 18.3 frames per second. Manufactured to go through at 24 frames per second. So it's been altered. Here's Mrs. Kennedy. Got a smile on her face. We'll see it. We'll look at a better copy of this in a minute. But I want you to see this as the American public saw it for the first time in 1975.
Sign, he is shot, then Governor Connolly is shot.
He's already been hit.
He's already been hit.
And now?
And at the bottom of the screen, the headshot.
That's the shot that blew off his head. It's the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in the movies.
Now, the Warren Commission said that all of the shots were fired from behind by Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone assassin.
You and I, every American taxpayer, owns this film today. Several years ago, but in the 2000s, the Zapruder film was purchased. The rights to the Zapruder film was purchased from Abraham Zapruder's estate for $16 million. So we own it at that price tag. This is what it looks like, much better. And nothing sinister over here. These are the sprockets. The white pieces are the sprockets in film. Anybody still have a 35 millimeter camera or a film camera like this? So you probably didn't know it, but that gets exposed too when your film is exposed. Zapruder started a film, and in those days, you couldn't delete it off your cell phone. You exposed the film, you used it, that cost money, and he was a little bit cheap. And so he stopped, and then realized the president's car is not coming yet, and that's why he started up again a little bit later. Here's your sign that'll get in the way. There's the young Willis girl over here, if you want to follow her just for a second. See her moving along there? Okay, she's going to give up. There's President Kennedy. Again, 18.3 frames per second, so don't get after Mrs. Kennedy for not reacting in an 18th of a second. No idea yet. The governor's holding his Texas 10-gallon hat with his right hand and right wrist that got shattered by the same bullet that Arlen Specter said has now entered Kennedy's back, exited his throat, tumbled forward, and done the damage to the governor. It's brutal. I hope you noticed that President Kennedy was not forced forward by a shot from behind. His reaction was violently back and to the left, indicating a shot from the front and the right. Remember the 81 witnesses, doctors, nurses, people who were at the autopsy. Mrs. Kennedy started to climb up and got on the trunk of the car. She was trying to retrieve a significant piece of President Kennedy, her husband's head, which had landed back there. In fact, she grabbed it. You saw one Secret Service agent react, Clint Hill. He's not part of this presentation, but I did interview him once. I'll tell you one thing he said. Well, there were 3 shots. His next sentence, well, I actually heard 2. There were 3 shots. Well, I actually heard 2. How does he know there were 3? That's not what he heard. Right away, I kind of dismissed him. But anyway, he ran forward. He was not assigned to President Kennedy. He was assigned to Mrs. Kennedy. So he proceeded to push her back into the car and threw his body over her and de facto over him, and watched from how far away Mrs. Kennedy tried to piece that piece of head back in to her husband. Gruesome. I'm going to move through this, but I just wanted you to, in the interest of time here, people ask, can you keep going? Can you keep going? You don't ask me that. I can keep going forever, and we don't have the hall forever. But you see the governor holding on to his hat there with his shattered wrist? Mrs. Kennedy still with a smile. Now Mrs. Kennedy is paying attention to her husband. His cheeks, are billowed, his mouth's filling up with blood. And the governor has been shot and wondered, he would later say, and turned around to see, am I the only one shot? When he turned around, many of the people on the side heard him say, quote, "My God, they're going to kill us all." And here comes the fatal shot. It's Warren Commission Exhibit 399 is the magic bullet. And that frame where his head explodes is frame number 316.
This version is slightly slowed down and is made.
Many other people took film that day, and it corroborates what Zapruder's film showed. Now I'm going to leave here and go somewhere else with the presentation. I'm not headed for the door just yet. I'm going to leave this small just for a minute, so your screen's in the top right-hand corner. There's the official drawing done by the Warren Commission. It is not accurate. That's what the Warren Commission gave to the American people. One of those bullets is the bullet that Arlen Specter and the Warren Commission said did all the damage in the Kennedy assassination. Back, throat, ribs, lung, wrist, thigh. And yet all of those bullets are in nearly perfect condition. The United States government withheld these photographs. The Warren Commission did testing and wanted to see what happens to a 6.5 millimeter Mannlicher Carcano bullet if you fire it through the wrist of a cadaver. And that's what they looked like. They're all mushroomed. Can you imagine what it would look like if it did all the damage that Specter said was done? These photographs were withheld from the American people for 8 years. I'm going to move forward again here. Would you like to hear the Willis Girl? All right. Are you okay with the top right-hand corner? You can see that all right? Yes. Okay, this is going to be a little loud. I'll get to it as fast as I can.
It was because people ran up this hill that they identify as the grassy knoll.
People ran up the hill. They didn't go to the school book depository. They ran up the hill.
My dad allowed the Secret Service.
Could you hear the rain in the other recording? That was the one I did not edit. This one I used artificial intelligence. Listen to this. Listen.
To take his film to Washington and study them for a good period of time. My dad really felt like one of his photos was altered. That day there were trains back there. And in some of the photographs, the trains show, and in my dad's particular...
In this photo, this is Phil Willis's photograph. This is the photo her dad took. There's President Kennedy, okay, just about to go behind the sign. Here's Abraham Zapruder and his secretary, Marilyn Zitzman, Abraham Zapruder, on the pergola. So this may be the last photograph of President Kennedy within reason, alive.
Particular photograph of that area, the train's missing.
Somebody took the train out of the film. He gave his film to the United States government. Many people did. And you would too. If somebody was killed here in downtown Putney and they said, you were taking pictures, you might be able to help us solve the crime. Maybe in the background of one of your photographs is a shooter, or however, whoever it is out there got killed. Please let us have your film. We'll give it back to you. In the Kennedy case, that's a maybe. Phil Willis' film was altered. The train, some of the background was taken out. And of course, in that area is the grassy knoll where there could have been a shooter.
Now, the day of the assassination, my dad went to the Eastman Kodak lab with Mr. Zapruder and the Secret Service to have all their film developed at the same time. So my dad saw his film straight out of the camera. He knew what was in there, and when he got it back from Washington, the train was gone.
That's my photograph that you're looking at now of Phil Willis' photograph. Phil took his on November 22nd. I took this one years later, but with a better camera. Here's Beverly Oliver standing in the plaza, November 22nd. She's the 17-year-old, should be in high school, girl. Here she is with her camera. This is Charles Brem, and beside Charles is his son. These are the two motorcycle policemen who are about to get splattered. What should be in the background of her film? A potential shooter from the front and up on the hill. There's Beverly, Charles Brem, his son, Jean Hill, the lady with a red dress, chain smoker. Never saw Jean without a cigarette in her hand. She was such a smoker. Now, Red, you're going to appreciate this. She was such a smoker that I saw her at times with a cigarette butt that was on its last leg, and she'd already started up another one using the previous one to light the second one. So she had one in each hand. She died of lung cancer. Here's Beverly. There's one of Jack Ruby's cards. Beverly had to prove she was in the plaza. She got paint. Beverly's film was given over to the authorities, and these documents show it. At the present time, this is an FBI document, United States Department of the Treasury, sorry, not FBI, but Secret Service, saying that at the present time we don't have her film. In other words, they're acknowledging that they took Beverly's film. The film, which was taken by Beverly Oliver, was not retained by the FBI. They had it. They had it, and they still to this day haven't returned it. I got to be careful. They're starting to look at me. 6 minutes till your break for a cookie and whatever. That's mandatory. I wouldn't give you a break, but it's mandatory. So you're getting a break. Beverly married Beverly Oliver Massagee. There's an envelope that came to her house in the 1990s threatening her life. Notice the grammar. Where's N-O? N-O. Okay. I can see your apostrophe already.
And I'm standing there with my camera still like this, and I'm in absolute shock. Just standing there. I could not move. People ask me, did the car stop? I don't know, Bill. Everything stopped for me. The whole world stopped. I don't know if it was 5 seconds, 5 minutes, I don't know, but I was in teetotal shock.
Okay, let me get rid of the long again. I think for you, we'll leave Oswald alone and we'll stay. If we have, I'm sorry, if we, I dropped the microphone. If we have time, we'll come back to Oswald. I doubt that we will, but you want me? No, I mean, there's so much here. I don't want to show all of the same things I showed in a week ago's presentation. You're okay? All right. All right. We'll stay right here then. We'll stay here. Just give me a second. Oswald, when he was arrested at the Texas Theater, which is a long way from the school book depository, they found Oswald because they asked the building administrator, a guy named Roy Truly, are all the employees who checked in for work today still here? And they all were, except one, Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald would explain later that he figured with what had happened outside, he wouldn't be, and they wouldn't be working anymore. Nobody'd be working anymore that day. So he left, went to the bus station, got on a bus. It got bogged down in traffic, got off the bus, walked over to the Greyhound bus terminal across Lamar Street, hailed a cab, and went to where he was living, ultimately at 1026 North Beckley Avenue. He went by a circuitous route, however. We'll leave that for now. And then allegedly shot a Dallas policeman at the corner of 10th and Patton Streets, about 9/10 of a mile from where he was living. Then moved, according to the Warren report now, to 231 West Jefferson Avenue, where he was arrested in the Texas Theater. A man had noticed that Oswald looked suspicious and went into the theater without paying for a ticket. The girl who was taking tickets, Julia Postal, was out of her post and had come out to the street and watching the activity while the police were flying everywhere. But John Brewer saw this guy, whoever he was, later turned out to be Oswald, went into the theater without buying a ticket. So he walks up to Julia and says, hey. So they called the police, and the police showed up, and they get Lee Harvey Oswald. One of the officers, arresting officers, was Officer McDonald, and as he was attempting to arrest Oswald, Oswald pulled a gun from his belt. And McDonald reached forward between his thumb and forefinger so it didn't fire. He hauled off and punched Oswald. If you look carefully, oh, you can't. I took it off the screen already. Oswald had a cut over his right eye, here. And his left eye was swollen. He had a pretty good shiner there. McDonald went home, by the way, that night and was trying to come down from the events. Sat down, had a beer like he usually did. His wife brought it to him, and then she announced dinner was ready, and he went in to wash his hands. And when he got in there and started to wash up for dinner, he noticed that in his wedding ring was wedged a reasonably sizable hunk of, this side, Lee Oswald's forehead. It was under his. When I talked to McDonald, he said, God, I wish I'd saved that. You know, I just threw it down the toilet, but it's probably worth something today. He said, it's funny. But anyway, when they arrested Oswald, it wasn't for the shooting of President Kennedy. It was for the killing of a Dallas policeman over in the Oak Cliff section of Dallas where Oswald was living. And this is going to be the voice of Detective Lavelle, who was put in charge of the Oswald shooting Tippit case.
He had 3 different picture IDs on him. He had one under his true name, he had one under O.H. Lee, and then he had one under Heidel.
Legitimate ID card, Lee Harvey Oswald. Another legitimate one, this man is O.H. Lee. And the third one that you're looking at, Alex James Heidel. All legitimate. Lavelle asked him, you know, which one of these guys are you? And a bit flippantly, Oswald said, you're the police, you figure it out. Would you do me a favor and take your break? And I will start earnestly. It's 11:01, I will start at 11:06, okay? So stretch your legs if you want, or go get something downstairs, use the toilet, whatever you want. So we're about one minute. We're about 1 minute, and I'll start up again. If you have friends who are in the basement, maybe give them a holler. I don't know. Don't know.
We're getting good shit this time.
Really?
We're gonna be able to make some hay out of this one.
Really?
Yeah, the promo stuff, big time. Are you kidding me? Like big screen.
Oh, you're able to get the screen? Yeah.
Big gas for the crowd. I mean, come on.
Did you get one?
Nobody wanted to hear about Lee Harvey.
Yeah. I guess. I thought,
You're gonna get a ration from Annie about that later on.
Yeah, I already did.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. All right, we'll go from here.
Because outside there was a lot of cursing and blaming, people talking about conspiracy.
Barry, okay to dim the lights again? We'll get started. He's not up there.
You said in earnest, but nobody believed you.
It's 6 after or something. I'm late. Can we do the dim? People still be able to see to get to their seats? After President Kennedy was shot, he was taken to Parkland Hospital and put in Trauma Room 1. An ambulance was called, and the way it worked in Dallas in those days was that an ambulance service, like the O'Neill Funeral Home, acted as a hearse, at times, and at other times as an ambulance. Reich had been down in the plaza, had been told that there was a fellow who'd had a seizure and they needed an ambulance 10 minutes before Kennedy was shot in Dealey Plaza. Now he was called to Parkland Hospital to gather President Kennedy's body. Al Reich, on the screen right here, was 24 years old that day. Lee Harvey Oswald was 24 years old that day. So here's Al Reich at Parkland Hospital, and it's his job, his company's job, to take President Kennedy's now proclaimed dead body out of the hospital and take it out to Love Field, where it can be put on Air Force One and taken back to Washington. It was a horrific scene in the hospital. Texas state law said capital crime, murder in Texas, autopsy in Texas. Federal officials said, no, this is the President of the United States. We're taking him back to Washington. The autopsy will be done back there. It ended up being a disaster for you and I not to know what happened in this case. A proper autopsy was never done on John Kennedy. Let's take a look at that. This is Al Reich's voice you will hear now. He's at the hospital. Mrs. Kennedy's there.
You got 4 or 5 different agencies there. You got the state there because they protect the governor.
You have 4 or 5 agencies there. You have the state,
You got the county because it's a county hospital. You got the city because it happened in the city. Then you got the FBI. You got the Secret Service, Department of the Army. All these people are back there blaming each other for what happened. If y'all would have done this or done that. There was a lot of hollering, a whole lot of cussing. And Miss Kennedy, all the time she was sitting outside the door, she could hear this. And we was in.
Al felt terrible about that. Here's Mrs. Kennedy with what just happened to her husband, and there's a near fist fight, weapons drawn, horrific language, back and forth struggle for President Kennedy's body. Who's going to get President Kennedy? Right in front of her. He felt terrible about that. By the way, this photograph I took, this Al and I talking together in my hotel room, just us.
In that room with the president was the only time we really felt safe, because we'd have been threatened, to keep our mouth shut and everything else. At one time, they got mad at us because I kind of started laughing because one guy was accusing another guy of something that didn't even pertain to the assassination, and I started kind of laughing, and then Secret Service come back there and told me to wipe the freaking smile off my face, and he'd knock it off for me.
So I obliged. Are you able to understand him? His Texasese? You're okay with it? Okay, good. Dr. Cyril Wecht is one of the most prolific, qualified forensic pathologists in opposition to the Warren Commission report's autopsy aspects alive. Still alive today. I was honored on the 50th anniversary 10 years ago to go to Dallas and speak, make a presentation. Not this same presentation you're getting, but one at the COPA conference, COPA, the Coalition on Political Assassination. It was pretty prestigious. And I made my presentation, and afterward my kids who were there said, it's a good thing you didn't have to speak after Dr. Wecht, because he is a speaker, and you've already discovered my deficiencies here. But anyway, this is Dr. Cyril Wecht, critical of the Warren Commission's finding relative to the autopsy or the non-autopsy report. This is the official drawing, verified down here in the bottom left corner by Dr. Berkeley. Notice where they put the back wound. The Warren Commission just showed you, I showed you a drawing, it was way up here. There it is. One of the people conducting the autopsy at Bethesda Naval Hospital is Paul O'Connor. And in the old school way, trying to determine where that bullet came from, the trajectory, he put his forefinger into the wound in the back of President Kennedy, and it was too big. And he found that his pinky finger would fit in, so he slipped it in there to see where it went. There was no bullet in there. Paul O'Connor, his words, not mine, hit rib meat, the intercostal muscles between the ribs. There was no bullet in there. It certainly didn't exit anywhere. You can see they've put just a small mark up here for the exit wound. The official autopsy photos show something very different than that. Kennedy was wearing a back brace that day, may have prohibited him from bending over as far as he might have from the first two wounds and escaped the headshot. You can see the scar from World War II. Remember the PT-109 that President Kennedy was in command of, and he hurt his back. It bothered him the rest of his life. There were times when he probably wasn't in the best shape to be president. He was a bourbon drinker. He took steroids. He had a doctor who he liked, who would come in and give him injections for pain. He had Addison's disease. There were times when he probably wasn't very coherent when he was president. Most people don't know that. There's Dr. Wecht.
You
My
move on
photograph.
next to the autopsy. Humes and Boswell, the naval pathologist, never had done a single gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers. That's from their mouths to our forensic pathology panel on the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Just think, how does it grab you? I said today, anytime I get a chance, especially with the people on the other side, how does it grab you as an American citizen? Our president, dead of multiple gunshot wounds, angle, distance, trajectory, sequence, correlation with the multiple wounds in John Connolly, that you call in two people who have never done a gunshot wound autopsy in their entire careers, that these imbeciles never even knew there was a gunshot wound in the front of the neck. I say to audiences, take a look at the person sitting to your right or left. Do you think you have to do 4 years of med school and 6 years of pathology, forensic pathology residency to see a hole in somebody's neck? How in the hell did they miss it? And you talk about the tracheostomy and so on. You talk about the fact that they placed a bullet hole at the external occipital protuberance, the bony prominence at the base of your skull, and then 4.5 years later, Attorney General Ramsey Clark brings together the Clark panel, and they move it up 4 inches. This is the kind of stuff that happened. Humes burning his autopsy notes at the fireplace of his home on Sunday night. If I went into a goddamn courtroom and I said to the judge, I burned my autopsy notes, my ass is out of there, man. I'm either in jail or I'm kicked out of court, okay? I mean, this is the kind of stuff that went on. And I went there and I saw December 6th. Serial coronal sections, side to side, of the brain are not made in order to preserve the specimen. Everything?
I want to make sure you understand that. It's important. They did not do a sectioning of the brain. If they did, we would know every bullet or any other thing that hit President Kennedy, where it came from, what kind, what velocity. We'd know everything. There would be no questions. We wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be babbling. But it wasn't done. It's the president. By the way, for those of you who are into this, to this degree, one of the people in the autopsy room at Bethesda Naval Hospital was General Curtis LeMay.
And I see
Bombs away with Curtis LeMay. I went to the Atrocities Museum in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, a few years ago, and they have a section of it dedicated to that statement, as well as him saying, we will bomb these rice eaters back into the Stone Age. As an American, among all those Vietnamese, I'm standing there in that museum looking at that.
April 26, 1965, here is the document that gives everything to Jackie Kennedy as a gift. Everything. The clothing, the bullets, the fragments, the rifle, the x-rays, the photos, given as a gift. That's right, you know. When I was coroner, we used to do that all the time. We put everything together, and we brought in Mrs. Jones, and we said, Mrs. Jones, we want you to have the pickaxe to split your husband's head open, and here are the clothing. We know you want to share this with your grandchildren, you want to put it on your mantelpiece, you want to have it as a special thing in your home, right? We did that all the time. And so I'm looking at the next document, which is October 29th, 1966, exactly one and a half years later. They bring in some of the people affiliated, involved with the assassination, and they do an inventory. And so now I'm looking, and that's when I see the metal box containing the president's brain, some x-rays, some photographs, and microscopic slides that we look at to differentiate entrance from exit wounds on skin pathology. They're not there.
We got a call from...
Where are they? Where are they? Even today. The official explanation is it's missing. Some people believe, I don't, some people believe that it was given to Robert Kennedy. This is Al Reich again, in my hotel room. I'm showing
on radio from the police department on a person having an epileptic seizure on the corner of Houston and Elm Street. We got to the location, and there was a man in had on camouflage clothes. He was laying on the sidewalk, and all he had was a little cherry scrape on his forehead, but he wouldn't give us any information. And this was approximately 10 minutes before the president was due to make his passage through that.
If President Kennedy's motorcade had been on time, somebody having a seizure here and the medical attention disrupting the motorcade would have stopped his car right under the window of the 6th floor. Stopped, dead in its tracks.
That area. So we picked him up and took him to Parkland because he had the, because he had the head injury. We went on ahead and run code 3, which is red light to siren.
Jones would be positioned, if looking at me, if you assume there's a table here and President Kennedy's head is here, his feet are down there, Dr. Jones was positioned right by President Kennedy's left shoulder. As a matter of fact, he would do a cut down on President Kennedy's left arm and start an IV. Other IVs were started in other places in President Kennedy's body as well. He had a clear view of the throat wound that the Warren Commission says is an exit wound. This is Dr. Jones. He's talking to my students, a group of students I took to Dallas.
When we first walked in, just a description of the wound, there was a very small hole right here in the skin, and I thought it was an entrance wound.
Oh, boy, huh? Hello? He's not trying to determine wounds, etc. He's trying to save the president's life, but it's what? 12 to 15 inches away from him.
I think Dr. Perry and Dr. McClellan, who later came in to the trauma room 1, also thought that it was an entrance wound. We knew there was a wound back here. We didn't know the extent of it. And I just quickly made an assumption in my head that somebody had come in, shot him from the front, serious incision for the tracheotomy, went right through that small hole that I judged to be about 1/4 of an inch in diameter.
When Kennedy, my apology for this, but when Kennedy's body arrived at Bethesda Naval Hospital and they put him down to do the autopsy, that's what the wound looked like. Something happened to President Kennedy's body between Dallas and Washington. That's not 1/4 of an inch in diameter with a pencil line scalpel slit through the middle of it. That wound's been mangled by somebody. Now, Al Reich would say that he and his pal Peanuts, after President Kennedy was pronounced dead, which Mrs. Kennedy refused to allow until a priest had seen him and given him the last rites as a Roman Catholic. So Kennedy received the last rites, and then Al and Peanuts had to put him in a casket. And the way they did that, standing beside the body, Al would take his left hand and put it under, in this particular instance, he did put it under President Kennedy's head, and he put his right hand under the small of President Kennedy's back. Peanuts was down on the back side and the ankles, and it's like 1, 2, 3 lift and put him in the... They started to do that, and Al's left hand disappeared into that huge hole in the back of the head. And he said, oh, put him down, Peanuts, put him down. So they put him back down. He said his head's still draining. So they wrapped his head to stop it from draining. And they put a bedwetting sheet, like from a hospital. They put a bedwetting sheet into the casket because, and these are Al Reich's words, I could play them for you, but we're going to run out of time here. It was the most expensive casket we had. The people at Bethesda, when they received the president's body, found that it was in a Vietnam War era body bag. It was not put in a body bag. I was fortunate enough to be The casket is a shipping casket, not the most expensive casket the O'Neill Funeral Home had. David Lifton, in his book Best Evidence, has identified between 6 minutes where Mrs. Kennedy wasn't with that casket. She was called forward to validate the ascendancy, the normal transfer of power in this country from president to vice president, to legitimize Johnson's presidency. So she left that most expensive casket we have in the back of the airplane and came forward. That's the only time she wasn't with that. Ostensibly, while she was away, President Kennedy's body was taken out of that most expensive casket we had and put into a pine box. Ed Hoffman saw somebody shoot at President Kennedy from the grassy knoll, in front of and to the right of, and slightly elevated. His name is Ed Hoffman. He doesn't speak, he makes sounds, he's passed away, guttural sounds, and he doesn't hear. So his eyesight was very acute. This is where Elm Street gets to the triple overpass, the railway overpass. This is the grassy knoll. You lose it here. This is the parking lot behind it. And here's where Ed Hoffman was. He'd gone to work that day, and having left work, realized, oh yeah, today's the day the president's coming. He had no intention of going to see the president, but he was off work for something that happened to him, an accident that happened to him at work. And he pulled over, parked his car illegally on Interstate 35, but nobody was going anywhere. And he could see into the parking lot. He could not see President Kennedy's car down here. It's all blocked, but he had a straight shot view. Now, in the years since 1963, signs have been put up, and the vegetation has grown considerably. There are photographs of it in 1963 that show that you had a clear view. And he saw this.
There's his fence, man in a suit, had a blue suit, looked like a black hat.
That's Ron Friedrich. He is an interpreter for Ed. Ed's using sign language. Is that me falling down? No, I'm still standing up. All right, anyway, here's Ed. Hang on. There you are, Ed. There. And he's talking about a man in a suit. Right here at the corner. There's the president's car. Beverly Oliver, Linda Willis, Jim Tague.
Standing there, looked around, and it's like he bent over. And then the man in the plaid shirt came around the north end of the fence to talk to him.
A man in a plaid shirt came around the north end of the fence and talked to the man in a suit. So this guy comes down here and talks to this fellow.
Chatted a bit. Then he went around, walked over to the railroad man, chatted with him a bit.
There's another guy up there too, the railroad man. Here he is. So the suit man talks to the railway man after the suit man talks to the plaid shirt man. Honest.
Man was standing by these switch boxes, and then came back, and I, of course, hadn't a clue what they were doing, and standing up there by the fence, bent over, picked something up, and he leaned over the fence. Now, I only saw his arms. I did not, I saw like his right arm. Yeah, he's right, I'm left-handed, he's right-handed. But anyway, this is the way he held it, and there was a puff of smoke, big puff of smoke, and he turned around, and
so Ed can only see the upper body of the guy in the suit, but he's got a rifle. And he fires a shot. Ed can't hear it, but Ed sees a puff of smoke wafting up. Several other witnesses corroborated Ed's story that they saw smoke. One of them is from the McNeil Lear News Hour. You remember that? Jim Lear was just a simple reporter that day in Dealey Plaza. He was here on the triple overpass.
And then he ran, holding his rifle, toward the railroad man, tossed it over, who caught it, turned around, and dismembered it. And I could see that, what he was doing. He was twisting something, and in two pieces, put it in a case, and then took off.
Ed's describing watching somebody tear the gun down, put it into its pieces, put it into a case, and then handing it off to somebody else. Now, a lot of witnesses, like Linda Willis said, you remember, ran up the knoll to the parking lot, and they found this guy. Here's the suit man. He was up there. And the authorities, what are you doing up here? And he flashed credentials that said he was Secret Service. So they let him go. In the days later, when they were trying to piece together what had happened, somebody actually remembered the name that was on the credential for this guy. And they said, where is this guy? They went through all the Secret Service agents, the authorities that were there that day. No such man. No such man.
And from this point, from behind the box over here, ran northward along the railroad tracks. His identification, and he let him go.
You remember James Tague, the guy that was hit by a missed shot that forced Arlen Specter's magic bullet theory? There's a painted white triangle right here. That's where he was standing on November 22nd. So the president's going to be killed just up here, and then the car is going to speed along. But a missed shot hits the curb right here at Jim Tague's feet. There's James Tague.
Maybe 3 or 4 seconds later, somebody throws a firecracker, which turned out to be the first shot. And I'm looking up there at the crowd wondering what kind of fool would throw a firecracker with a president coming by. And then crack, crack, 2 rifle shots. Anyway, during that crack, crack of 2 close together rifle shots, something stunned me in the face. And we stood there and talked.
My daughter's here, and Reggie. You remember Jim Tague standing in front of you and pointing to where the... You remember? All right. She said, yes, I do. For the onliners.
A minute. He looked at it and says, you've got blood on your face. 3 or 4 drops of blood. I remember at that point, something had stunned me during a shooting. He said, look, look. And you can see on this dirty, blackish, grayish concrete, a white gray mark. Right?
So the Warren Commission made a big deal of this. They brought a crew down to Dealey Plaza with a jackhammer, and they took the piece of curbing out. And that's what Jim right now is describing. It's part of the plethora of exhibits on the Kennedy assassination in the National Archives.
Very visible. Walked over, both Buddy and I reached down, felt the mark. It was fresh, obviously a rifle shot. Over a ½ inch wide, over 3/4 of an inch long.
They buried me. James Tague did not exist until next July. I do have copies of the FBI law.
He went to the FBI to tell them what had happened to them. They told him to go away. He didn't exist as far as the Warren Commission report.
Their office. There's 16 reports made on James T. Tague in that period of time, yet the Warren Commission is not aware of the existence.
The second shot actually penetrated.
This is Paul O'Connor. There's a chapter on him in the book there. He's quite a fella. If you look in his hands there, you can see the bottleneck, dark bottleneck. You with me? He had just spoken inside the assembled hall and had finished his talk, and he went out and sat down when I went to him. This is a horrible photo I took with a previous generation's digital video camera, and I turned it into a still. It was 9:30 in the morning when I walked up on Paulo. 9:30. But this man was at the autopsy. He was at Bethesda Naval Hospital.
The president's back, just below the terminal. Hold your head down, feel a little lump in the back on your spine. That's a seventh cervical vertebrae.
Seventh cervical vertebrae is where he saw the bullet. He's the guy I told you put the finger in, his pinky, and hit rib meat.
And go down 3 inches and about 1.5 inches to the right. That's where the bullet struck, second bullet struck the president. So it didn't have the velocity that it should have, because if it had, the bullet would have passed through his back and exited around his heart area and traveled all right into the floor of the car. It didn't do that. That bullet just bruised his lungs, went through the muscles between the ribs. I say this not to be facetious, but for you to understand what I'm talking about. I'm talking about rib meat. The intercostal muscles are called rib meats. He didn't touch a bone, angled downward, and stopped. I positioned myself at the front of the casket, and all of us lifted slowly the president's body onto the table. As I was doing so, holding onto the shoulder and the head, my hand was grinding against the skull.
Same thing that happened to Al Reich when he and his pal Peanuts tried to move the body into the casket. It's happening to Paul O'Connor here at Bethesda. His hand disappeared. Wound in the back of President Kennedy's head, the occipital parietal area.
My fears were worsened every second. I said, oh gosh, something is terrible has happened here. Dr. Hughes and myself unwrapped the bloody sheet from the president's head, and I looked down, and my first thought, I said to myself, good God, it looked like a bomb exploded inside President Kennedy's head. I've never seen any devastating injury like that before in my life. The whole top of his right side of his head was actually gone, blown away. He had no brains in his head. The door burst open in the back of the morgue, and 6 gentlemen, Navy enlisted personnel.
I've backtracked now to when the body first arrived. The door burst open, and some naval men are bringing in President Kennedy's body.
Came in carrying a gray shipping casket.
In a gray shipping casket.
Inside the casket was a gray body bag.
Never put in a body bag in Parkland Hospital.
Unzipped the body bag, zipped right down the midline here. Inside was a unclothed, frail-looking body with a bloody sheet wrapped around the head.
So they had called a priest to come out there. Meantime, the casket had arrived, and we had it in position to put him in the casket. So we was going to pick.
This is backed up now to Al Reich again. Do you want me to? I more or less told you about Al. Do you want me to stay with this or go to a different spot? Keep going with. All right. Move on? Oh, okay. Hang on. Demanding group here today. It's all right. Skull. Who said that? I know who said it. There's the casket. There was the casket being unloaded in Andrews Air Force Base. Mrs. Kennedy's with it, but in all probability, she's not with her husband. but doesn't know it. This is Dennis David. He also was at Bethesda receiving the body of President Kennedy.
I was the senior enlisted man at the Naval Medical School and received the body of the president when it came in that night at Bethesda, Maryland. I received him some 30 minutes or more before the official body actually arrived.
Did you get that? 30 minutes before the official party came with that fancy casket, he'd already received the body. So who's Mrs. Kennedy and her entourage with?
We received him in a shipping casket. 20 minutes later, I went up and watched the official group coming in with the fancy bronze casket that was supposed to contain JFK's body, but we'd already had him in the morgue some 20 minutes before then.
This a little bit of an eye-opener for you?
We were in the press secretary's office.
Switching tact completely here. This is Abraham Bolden. I was texting back and forth with Mr. Bolden last night. He was hoping that he would be available today to take a phone call, which I would have put on speakerphone so you could hear him yourself. This is the first African American ever to be in the presidential detail of the U.S. Secret Service Department of the Treasury. Very first one. He's not well right now. He's 88, closer to 89 than 88.
Pierre Solinger walked over and he said, Pierre
Solinger, President Kennedy's press secretary, walked up to him.
He says, I want you to meet Abraham Bolden. Said, he's the Jackie Robinson of the Secret Service. Yeah. You had agents within the Secret Service during that particular time who hated President Kennedy, and they were his immediate bodyguards. See, I heard with my own ears is that nobody told me this. I heard with my own ears agents that were saying, if somebody take a shot at President...
See my microphone in my hand there? You're listening to it right now. This is 2009.
President Kennedy, I won't respond. I'll let it happen. Somebody need to kill the SOB.
That's the Secret Service. They did not like President Kennedy.
Harvey Henderson looked me in the eye, and he told me, he says, we're in Hyannisport protecting the President of the United States. And this hurt me dearly, but I learned from it. He says, Bolden, I say, yeah, we're sitting in a little apartment room. He says, I'm going to tell you something, and don't you ever forget it. He looked me right in the eye. He was sitting on the couch, something like this, and he leaned forward and he says, you're a nigger. You were born a nigger. You're going to die a nigger, and you will never be anything else but a nigger.
My God, huh? By the way, my book right now is being converted to an audio book. And when the audio book proof came back to me, some of the pronunciations were off, even though I had put some in. I hadn't put all the ones that they apparently needed me to put in, so I had to listen to my book again. And I noticed there was a whole paragraph missing from Abraham Bolden, and it was that paragraph right there. They refused to read, I guess, the N-word into the book. Let me just check here. We can go back now. I was desperate to make sure that you got this far, but we can go back and let me have you pick something that you might like. There's Dr. Wecht. Here's Oswald and what happened to him and how he got killed. Are you interested in that? I didn't hear anything, so. All right, you're okay with that. All right. You remember we left off
Then he was going to get his denial in early.
with Oswald with the 3 IDs. This is the Dallas City Jail. This photograph I took in the late 90s. You can't get near here now. It's never open. Just to the left of this was a Western Union office, and Jack Ruby went in there just minutes before shooting Lee Harvey Oswald. And he wired some money to one of his dancers, an advance on her salary. He was very generous. Came back here. We don't know if he went down this ramp into the city jail basement or he went in another way. But there was a time when you
We got downstairs, as I walked out into the basement, all those cameras come on, the floodlights from the TV cameras, and blinding for.
This is Jim Lavelle again. He's handcuffed to Oswald now. They're moving. Sorry, he's handcuffed to Oswald now, and they're moving Lee Harvey Oswald from the city jail. There had been threats on his life to what they considered a more secure jail, the county jail, which ironically overlooks Dealey Plaza. He never got there.
For a little bit, but for a moment. But underneath the lights, I could see the people, and I saw Ruby standing there in the front, right in the middle of the ramp, and he had the pistol in his hand. As I come out, well, he took 2.
I got real lucky one time when I went into the city jail alone. I was alone, and the jail was up on the 5th floor, so they had to bring Oswald down to the basement. If you make a right-hand turn here, there's an elevator. Oswald and Lavelle and others came down on the elevator, came out into this hallway, and walked in this direction to the garage. When I say I got lucky, there was a secretary upstairs in the 5th floor. I don't know how I got to the 5th floor, to be honest with you. I got into the 5th floor of Dallas City Jail, where the cells are. And I was talking to her, my story. I said, is there anybody here that knows anything about the day Lee Harvey Oswald was being transferred from here downstairs and so forth and so on? Well, nobody here is working here who was working back then. But there was a guy in the back office, and he heard the conversation between me and the secretary, and he came out of the office and he said, hey, I might be able to help you. He said, I was trained by Jim Lavelle. And he told me the whole story. And so this police officer told me the story. I guess he was a detective.
2 short steps and double actioned the pistol into his midrib. Well, I had him by the, you can see that I'm holding on to his belt as well.
Here he is. Here he comes. Now the prisoner, what?
This is Jim Lavelle, a man talking to you. This is Lee Harvey Oswald. They're just coming off the elevator and entering the hallway.
Let me have it. I want it.
There again, Lavelle and Oswald. You can't see it, but they're handcuffed to one another. Lavelle's left wrist is handcuffed to Oswald's right wrist.
Being let out by Captain Fritz. There is the prisoner. There is Lee. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's a man with a gun. It's absolute panic. Absolute panic here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Detectives have their guns drawn. There is no question about it. Oswald has been shot at point-blank range, fired into his stomach.
He is shot. He is shot. Oswald.
It is Oswald. You are? Was that the man that shot the man, or do you know?
That is the man that shot the man.
When
This is Lavelle again, and you can see it here. You probably all remember this photograph. Some of you, like myself, watched this live on television Sunday, November 24. Lavelle is wearing the white coat. If you look down, you can see his right wrist, handcuffed to Oswald. Here's Ruby putting the gun into Oswald's left chest.
Started down after, when I was handcuffing myself to Oswald, I told him, I said, Lee, if anybody shoots at you, I hope they're as good a shot as you are.
They're just joking with one another. A premonition of things to come. They're coming down to this spot, and Lavelle says, geez, I hope if anybody shoots at us, they're as good a shot as you are.
Meaning they'd hit him and not me. Well, he kind of smiled, and only time he smiled while he was in custody, and he said, oh, you're being melodramatic or something like that. He said, nobody's going to shoot at me.
Within seconds.
I said, well, if they do, you know what to do. And he said, Captain Fritz has told me to follow you, and I'll do whatever you do. So I told him he'd be on the ground in a hurry, but I didn't realize how quickly that was going to happen.
Lavelle was talking to a group of my students again on this time in that previous picture. And he sized us up. You know, he was a detective. He looked around at the kids. There were about 22 of us there in total, a couple of adults, the rest students. And after a few minutes, he stopped talking. He goes, y'all one of them conspiracy classes, aren't you? All the kids, their heads rotated 180 degrees, looked right at me. Go ahead, tell him. And they told him. They shared their thoughts with him, and he was okay with it. We weren't a conspiracy class. We were trying to find out the truth. Automatically, you're categorized as a conspiracy nut or a Warren Commission supporter. I put this in just, I invited Jim to come to the hotel and talk with a student. So being a former detective, he pulls up in his vehicle and parks right in front of the hotel. There's no parking. And they gave him a ticket. They gave him a ticket, and you'll see his license plate on the ticket is RET, retired, DPD, Dallas Police Department, and his number. I paid the ticket.
About halfway out to Parkland,
this is one of the few, very few, most of the photographs in the book are my own, but there are a couple that I had to pay for, and this is one of them, was taken at the time, and this is Oswald on the stretcher. They're now putting him on the stretcher.
He made a groaning sound, and then just went completely limp. And I've always thought that that's probably when he expired. But when I took him into the operating room at Parkland, the doctors were waiting for him because they'd been notified in advance. The bullet was sticking up right here under the skin.
Oswald had on a white T-shirt underneath all of this, then a collared shirt, then a navy blue sweater.
About like that. Underneath the skin, you could see it very plainly. So I told...
We don't have the picture that he was showing at the time. There is no picture, but when they got to Oswald and he'd passed, they found a bulge in his lower back here. It was the bullet that Ruby had fired. It hadn't completely escaped his body. And so he called over the head nurse, Doris Nelson. He said, I want you to bring a scalpel. I want you to cut across here. And that bullet popped out. And he said, you pay attention to what you're doing because you're going to have to sign an affidavit later.
I told the doctors, I said, before you do anything else, I want this bullet.
What he did when he turned was...
This is Dr. Jones, the same guy I was telling you about earlier who identified this as an entrance wound. He's in the hospital on duty on the 24th when Oswald comes in. So he was present at both. I'm going to turn him down a little. Sounds like he's a little loud.
Instead of taking this shot straight on, he turns and he gets shot right here in the left chest. And it goes through his diaphragm, much like a shish kebab, comes in and gets the spleen, comes across the abdomen. The aorta is the main artery out of the heart. There's a large vessel that supplies all the bowels, the superior mesenteric artery. It blew that right off the front of the aorta. Now, the aorta is like a water hose. Came across.
No doctors. That bullet, because of Oswald seeing the gun come toward him, turning slightly, penetrated his spleen, but it also cut off the main hose into and out of the heart. Dr. Jones describes them as, I think his words are here, but blood was going everywhere in Oswald.
Which is the largest vein in the body, bringing blood back to the heart, then went through the renal artery, renal vein, the kidney, and on into the kidney itself. And so his ultimate demise was a result of just massive blood loss. Eyes open. He was not moving, but he did have a heartbeat. I listened, and I thought, we're not going to get in this situation again. Is he alive or is he dead before we start? He had a heartbeat. He had no palpable blood pressure, had no palpable pulse, but he was alive. Same sequence of events. I did a cut down in the cephalic vein. That's not a common place to start an IV, but I could see it and did it real quick. And Dr. Jenkins intubated Oswald, and we had him in the operating room within about 7 minutes from the time he came into the emergency room. Estimated blood loss was 16 pints, and that's what he was given with blood. And he received some IV fluids, about 6 liters, and it said in the operative note that he expired at 1:07 p.m. He never received any significant anesthesia, just oxygen. He never got a blood pressure up to above about 60, normal being up around 120.
There was a phone call to the hospital while they were trying to save Oswald. It was from the former vice president, now president, Lyndon Baines Johnson. This is secondhand. Somebody who was there when the phone call came in told me this, so I can't verify it. There's no recording of it. But the voice from the White House said, "You get a confession out of that son of a bitch before he dies." Oswald never said a word.